Are you getting tired of lockdown and struggling to look for some creative things to do? Well, not to worry. Hornby have asked me to show you a really quick and easy technique for weathering your wagons. And you don't even need an airbrush for this. So, I'm going to take you from this to this and show you how we can do this with just a simple application of Humbrol weathering washes. This is the wagon that I'm going to be showing you how to do a quick and easy method of weathering on today. And you don't need an airbrush to do this. That's quite important. I think a lot of people get put off weathering by thinking that they need an expensive airbrush and that it's all very, very tricky. It isn't. You can do this with weathering washes to get this to transform into this. It's just brush applied weathering washes, and it's a great way during this lockdown to be creative with wagons that you may already have and that are also still available quite readily mail order from a number of different outlets. It's a great wagon. It's been in the Hornby range over a couple of years, appeared in a lot of different guises, but never ready to run factory weathered. But not to worry, you've got plenty of time on your hands, so I'm going to show you how to get this to this. As you can see, they were originally part of the same triple pack, so there's no tricks involved. This is quite simply just Humbrol weathering washes. Now I'm going to put this one to one side, just put that over there, and I'm going to bring in the weathering washes which I'm going to be looking to use. So first up is the Humbrol Rust Wash. This is a great way with a metal steel based wagon to get a really good sense that it's been subjected to the elements and it's led a hard life and started to rust. Anything steel in an industrial setting does pretty much start to rust, no matter how well painted it was to start with. And this is a great product for doing most of the work actually. The other product that I've used on these is the Black Wash, and we've got here the Humbrol Black Wash. There are a number of different colours in the range, but it's just these two that you're going to need to do this. And actually, a little tip for you, this one is really more convenient. You could actually, just with this, use the dirty brush cleaning fluid from whenever you've cleaned your paint brushes. And actually that'll do the job of this of the black wash. You only need a very tiny amount, as you'll see later on. And what I tend to do, I'll just show you this here. I get some of these plastic type party type cups, and this is really great for keeping your brush cleaning fluid. So I'm just going to move that to one side, and you can see in there the dirty mess of white spirit, and that's where I always clean my brushes. And this is a great weathering medium as well, and you can actually substitute this for that black wash. And a top tip for you, if you get another cup, and just don't push it down, otherwise it'll all squeeze out, but if you put another cup in the top, that just stops that from drying out and also stops it from smelling up the house with the smell of white spirit. And this is the product that I'm using. Any white spirit will do, but you can get this from any supermarket. So when you're going out for your essentials, you can pick one of these up from the DIY aisle whilst you're out there. The other things that you're going to need, well, I've got a fairly wide, broad brush here. You don't have to use a broad brush like this. You can always substitute for whatever brushes you've got to hand. And later on, we're going to be needing a smaller, stubbier, stiffer bristled brush. Again, use whatever you've got to hand. So I'm going to put this to one side for now because this comes up a little bit later on in the process. First up is the Rust Wash. What I'm going to do, give this a good shake, try and mix up, because they do tend to settle out a little bit. And also, if you find that your Rust Wash or your Black Wash or any of these washes is starting to run out of fluid, starting to just get sort of sludgy at the bottom, you can actually very easily rejuvenate these by adding a little bit of white spirit in and just stirring it up. And that's a great way to eke these out for as long as possible. So I'm going to open this up and I don't know how well you can see in there. It's quite... I'm just going to give it a good stir, and you can see it's kind of like paint that's gone a little bit odd, but it's supposed to be like this. And if we get the wagon, I'm going to start from the inside, and you just paint it like it's paint and get all of the little nooks and crannies covered in there. Just trying to keep that on screen for you. Get it right down into the bottom of the hopper. Don't put too much on, because it will just pool in the bottom and will firstly spend too long drying, but also you get some slightly odd effects which look a bit off. So you can soak up some of that spare weathering wash as it pools with the brush and use it elsewhere on the wagon. What I like to do is vertical strokes, so that any kind of running in the wash looks like rainwater has pushed it downwards. So we've got all of the inside there done, and what we're going to move on to next is doing the outside of these. So again, in the main, vertical strokes. If you need to get into the nooks and crannies, that's fine to go at different angles, but let's just get right down in there. But the final application works best if you get it vertical, and it just means that when we come to the final stage of the weathering, any streaks in this look like it's rain that's pulled the weathering downwards. And you might be looking at this and thinking, it just looks like you're repainting it in a kind of a rust colour. But don't worry, a lot of railway modelling doesn't have to look perfect at every stage. The middle stages sometimes do look a little bit odd, but have confidence in yourself. With a lot of these techniques and methods, confidence is the most important thing. You've got to tell yourself, I can do this, and you can. It is very, very easy. We've got no airbrush to use, so you don't have to worry about that with problems with spray going everywhere. And you can see a little bit of this rust wash does go a long way. And we're also going to be doing the chassis too, and just slowly work it in, the hopper part at the bottom as well, and this brings out all of the detail. It's a really great way of bringing to life the amazing detail that Hornby have got onto this wagon. And I think it's one of the unsung heroes of the range. I used to have a Hornby 00 version of these, but I would never have dared to have done this with my childhood Hornby 001. Apparently they're quite valuable now, so whatever you do, don't get an old Hornby 001 and do this to it, because they're quite a valuable model. But certainly these newer super detail versions been in the range for a couple of years, as I said before. But then before that as well, Hornby had the L&ER hopper in their railroad range, and that too can really bring the best out of a wagon with a weathering. So we're getting into, and you want to try and get all of these little gussets underneath here, get them coloured on both sides. It's easy to miss bits, so I like to hold them by the buffers, and this is going to be a little bit of a messy job. You can see it going all down my finger, so you're just going to have to accept you might get a little bit messy fingers, and make sure that you don't do this on your best tea towels or tablecloths. I've got an old piece of scrap plywood down just in case anything drips, and believe me, it will drip a little bit no matter how careful you are. So get into all of the underside of the wagon there, just just going to try and see. Don't put your fingers on the hopper sides once it's wet, because you'll leave fingerprints. And then just try and get that buffer beam detail. And I think that just about got it all there. So I'm just going to bring in a piece of kitchen roll. You can use loo roll out of that huge stash that you may have stacked away. Somebody must have it all. Just put the brush down on there, and then we can see that that rust wash has got, I've just missed a little bit down there. You can just see it's so easy to miss in some of these gussets. Don't worry about it brushing away stuff on the sides. We'll get that in a moment. And then vertical strokes. Let's just double check on the other side. Yep, and everything is now covered. Now what we're going to do now, leave this to dry. Put it to one side and just forget about it. You can work through several wagons at a time, get a bit of a production line going, but this first stage is probably the messiest. So I'm going to put this to one side and let it dry, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to show you the next stage. So I've just cleaned up a little bit here. You don't want to have a lot of this stuff on your hands. Make sure you go and wash it carefully and don't get it on your towels. But we're now all done with the rust wash. We can put that to one side. We're going to clean up the brush. Like I said to you before, if you just keep this dirty brush cleaning fluid, this is also a great free weathering medium. So just get that brush cleaned. Again, we don't really need this brush now. I'm just going to clean that off, put it to one side, try and clean some of this off my fingers. Just put that in the top, stop it from drying out. And then what I'm going to do is Blue Peter style. Here's one I did earlier. So you can see this is now dried. This is another one of the 21-ton hoppers. I've done all the chassis and everything, and you can see that once it dries, I can actually handle that. It's not rubbing off, and we've got that base colour of rust. This stage, what you want to do is get your little piece of kitchen roll, and we want this brush. Now, if you're going to use the black wash, if you got it to hand, that's great. And I'm going to show you with the black wash because I do have that to hand. But if you don't have the black wash, then you can use that dirty brush cleaning fluid. So I'm going to get some of that on there. And then what I do is I actually wet just the rim of the weathering wash. Now you may be thinking, why are you doing that? Well, you don't want too much of the wash on your brush, because what it will do is it will dissolve this and you'll just end up smudging it. So you get the brush fairly dry, and then what we're going to do is, there's probably a little bit too much still on that, just dry it off a little bit. We're going to scrub in, and you can see that weathering wash starting to break away a little bit. And again, if you don't want too much of this wash on, otherwise it takes too much off. It kind of makes it just this sort of messy, swirly mess, and you don't get this effect of kind of like flaked paint. In effect, what you're getting is the reverse of flaking the paint off. By flaking the rust off, you're exposing the clean paint underneath, and that's why you want the short bristled brush, because we're going to scrub in there, and it's taking off some of that rust wash that we had. And then we get that kind of flaking rust paint being exposed. At the point that your brush stops taking that top layer off, you can recharge it, so to speak, and that's where wetting the rim of the weathering wash comes in, because that means you can pick up a very small amount, because you don't want that brush to become saturated, because if you do, it'll just wipe all of this off and you'll just get a smudgy mess of like wet paint, and you won't get this great effect. Getting in underneath there. And we're just going to move along and do all of these different panels. Take a panel at a time and just work at it. Again, if you need a little tiny bit more of the weathering wash, don't overload that brush, and you're getting that effect of flaking paint. And no two wagons will end up looking the same, so you get a really good variation in your train. Just be careful of some of this brake gear, you don't want to harm any of that. And then when it comes to where the data panel is, I always take the view that they should probably be a lot cleaner. So I'm going to try and clean up that data panel. Just concentrate on cleaning that up. And that's why you need an old brush, because this brush is no good for painting, because look at how those bristles have splayed out. But for this, it is the perfect task. Again, if you need just a little bit more of that solvent, not too much, just I think that's starting to dry out. So as this dries out, re-moisten the rim. There. And we work along the whole wagon like this. And you can see just how easy this is. You don't need any great skill to do this. It's just confidence. And every panel turns out a little bit different from the last. So you can see that this wagon has come out different to this wagon. And you can experiment. You can get different techniques, and it really does. You can see just how much of a difference it's made to these great wagons. Now, the inside of the hopper, don't do the same technique in there. These wagons would have been loaded up with coal. It would have very quickly scrubbed all the paint off the insides. So I just leave that with the plain rust wash. I think that, as you can see on that one, it works a lot better like that. You don't need any of the black wash. When it comes to the chassis, you can afford to get a little bit more of this black wash and just sort of smudge it around a little bit. And that just mutes down that rust colour on the chassis. Just try and delve into the bottom of that rust wash, get some of the black pigment, and we're just muting down the rust on the chassis. And by using a little bit more solvent, don't get it on the hopper sides. You're taking back some of that rust to black and just making it look a little bit more realistic. And there you have it. That's one side of this wagon done just whilst I've been talking to you. Then we put this to one side once the rest of the wagon's done and just leave it to dry before you handle it. And then you're good to go. And this here is the final item. You can still see some of that paint's a little bit wet, and just a few areas if you decide just want to brighten up some of that weathering on those gussets. Show a little bit of that paint through. There you have it. Final weathering on the wagon. And as you can see, that is different to the technique that was used on this one. With this, I used a little bit more of the black weathering wash and pulled it downwards, just trying to clean up those panels more to make this look like a slightly better condition one. So there's a lot of different techniques you can apply, and it's a case of just experiment, see where you get to, and the end effect, just play about with it. If you're not happy in the slightest, you can take a brush with some white spirit and just gently clean all of those panels back to that factory finish and start again if you want. It's up to you, but I think that that is a great way of spending an hour or two just improving your wagon fleet, and it doesn't really need a lot of skill. It's just a case of have confidence in yourself. You can do it. That's been a great inspiration to you and shown you just how easy you can get creative with your Hornby wagons and the Humbrol weathering washes. It's a great range and it does an awful lot to fight the boredom of lockdown blues. I hope this has been really informative to you. So from me, Jenny Kirk, and from Hornby, happy modelling.